All right.
Start from 2.
Every second counts. Okay, so I thought today we would talk about the wiring up of the condensing unit to the furnace, thermostat to the furnace, what each wire does, why we hook them up the way that we do. From the condensing unit, you got your line set, then you run your 2-wire. This is just a standard AC unit. Usually this is what we're putting in. You get your 24 volts and your common coming into your furnace. So that's going to be coming, so you'll have 2 wires going to common, well, maybe more if you're hooking up some other things, but your 24 volts will be going to your furnace control board, and then same thing from out here, there, and then your common. Both meet and connect on the board in the furnace or air handler. They call them an air handler because they can be just a fan and a coil sometimes. Usually in Montana, we're using furnaces, gas furnaces. Your thermostat, of course, is going to have 24 volts, fan, cooling, heat, and common. Common wires, color that they use is red for 24 volts. And there is no, you just have to kind of memorize this stuff. Red for 24 volts, fan is usually green, cooling is usually yellow, and then heat is usually white, and then common is blue or black. We usually use blue just because it's usually what's in our little 5-wire left over. So it's very common to see common as black as well, especially in 8-wire and larger systems. So, and all this does is your furnace powers everything. So your furnace will send the 24 volts to your thermostat, and it just sits there. If you go to your thermostat and you hit fan on, it then closes a little switch and sends power back to the relay board, turns the fan on.
I can grab that fan on it, the board on it.
Yeah, go ahead. And then if you turn on the cooling, it's gonna send voltage to your thermostat, and your thermostat's gonna close fan and cooling. So 2 switches are gonna go. It's gonna send the voltage back, turn on the fan, send 24 volts to your coil on your contactor, and then from there it'll come back to make a loop back to the board, turning on, pulling in the contactor and turning on the outdoor AC unit. So if you think of a thermostat as little more than just a switch on a wall, that's all it is. That's all it does is it just turns things on. Your heat, of course, it goes there, and then there's a whole order of process when it comes to doing turning on the furnace. But know that when it turns on the heat, and then it does some other things where the board actually fires up the heat, the flame going through it, the inducer motor. And we'll go through all of that closer to fall when we're going to get into the heating season. But just know that all the thermostat is basically a glorified switch. It's just a switch that is controlled by temperature and by you, by turning on the fan. A lot of people turn on the fan just to kind of rotate air, move air through. But if you think of that as just a switch, it's not a magic switch, it's just a switch, it's all it does. And so if this is not sending voltage back when you turn it on, and you go to your furnace and you go in there and you jump from 24 volts to fan and it kicks on, but you go to your thermostat and you turn it on and the fan doesn't come on, it's pretty clear that you got a bad fan motor, or not a bad fan motor, a bad thermostat. And the same thing with the heat. And so that's a quick, easy check if you think you have a bad thermostat. Now sometimes they read incorrectly, it's very rare, but I have just ran into a really nice thermostat that was off by 6 degrees. Yeah, it was. And I mean, 6 degrees is if it's set in saying 76 degrees and it's 70 degrees in their house, they're like, something's wrong. And I went in there and tried to change it. It only gives me about 5 degrees, so it's still 1 degree. But they paid $350 for this thermostat. So 1 degree, it's like we're getting them a new one. And so there are some checks. That's when you use your thermostats and you're checking your thermostat to make sure it's reading correctly against that. So, any questions?
That one makes sense.
That one's an easy one?
Yeah, right.
Well, they don't all have to be hard.
Normally there's a board on this, but I don't know where it went. A control board, that's where all the wires would meet, sit roughly in here. But
basically, if you got 24 volts setting out at your condensing unit across your contactor and it's not pulling in, or let's say it is pulled in and you're not getting 24 volts, you need to be looking at that contactor. Either it's stuck closed or it's bad, or the common wire coming back to your furnace. Sometimes they hook it to the cooling part. I ran into this a lot, especially with new techs. They would hook 24 volts and the other wire to Y, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like, oh, that ain't gonna work, because all you're doing is sending 24 volt leg to both sides and it does nothing. It's just, it doesn't get that loop.
Furnace we just did up in the mountains, those double swap out, when we wired that, and then we were like, okay, it's heating and cooling at the same time. What the hell is going on? So I shut it off, went up there, and they had it like jumped. It was
Jumped at the thermostat?
well, not jumped at the thermostat, but they had because our wiring, they used a weird wire for heating, I think is what it was.
That's right, I remember
And
this.
they used
yeah.
like black for heat or
Yeah.
something. So it was, instead of common, it was like all weird.
So yeah, if you're gonna go wire up, let's say you unwire the furnace, you need to go and check your thermostat, because just because commonly we use those colors for how we do it, you never know what a homeowner's gonna do. They might use black for fan and red for cooling and yellow for 24 volts. So you gotta go look at the thermostat, match your thermostat. I usually just change it over to what I'm used to. But if you don't want to do that, just take a picture of the way it's wired up on the thermostat and then go match it to the furnace. And then make sure that your 24 volts and your common are going to the furnace for the AC unit. And if it was a heat pump, there is like 5 wires coming back in, because the outdoor unit would run in first stage heating, cooling, it needs a common wire, and then it also has a defrost setting that it's got to run through. So it wires up completely different, and that is for another day. And we're not putting a crazy amount of heat pumps in. 3, 4 in the last year. It hasn't been, maybe 2 in the last year. So it hasn't been a crazy amount, but we're gonna start seeing more and more of them. And so we will go over that once I know it better and I can teach it. We'll go over all that, but it'll probably be for next year, because we're kind of winding down on cooling season. So AJ, if you go to wire this thing up, you're gonna bring your 2-wire in. You'll wire it up to the condensing unit outside on this job out here, and then you'll bring it into the furnace and you'll just wire. It'll say right on there, 24 volts and common, or C. That'll be what you hook up. And then if you do the thermostat, it'll go into the furnace. Now with
Wouldn't it say R?
R.
R? Not.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good thing. He just told me R is R 24 volts.
So
A lot of people just use red, R, or sometimes on a thermostat it says 24 volts. And then on the furnace it'll say R.
I was gonna say, I've seen R written on a lot of thermostats.
Okay,
And
so
that's the 24 volt one.
That's the 24 volts. So yeah, if you see
Some of the
R,
fancy
I always
ones
thought
say
R was
24
R
and
was
stuff.
always just red. I was like, oh, R. Really?
Yeah.
and that's why.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, usually the red wire is our 24 volts. Usually
Okay.
they do, so a lot of times they do call it R, and that is your 24 volts. And then your fan,
Well, that makes
they'll
sense.
just go G. Don't ask me why, but a lot of
Green.
times. Green, yeah.
Go! Green for go is what I think.
Whatever it makes you remember.
Right?
And then yellow, they'll have a Y, that's for your cooling, and then W for heat.
Never could figure out one of those.
You just kind of have to remember it, yeah.
Yeah,
And honestly,
I've
it's,
ever seen just
I think that's why I like
switch.
switch them in my head sometimes.
You know,
I have to think
and
about it
C
and
is
plan.
not cooling; it is common.
Yeah, that's what I would always think, is C should be
I like
cool.
color.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for that. Now, when you do this, and we are going to be doing this, not always does your thermostat run to your furnace. Sometimes it will run over to a board, especially when we're doing zones. So your board will then become like the control board on the furnace. And so your
Is that because you had multiple, machines going?
thermostats. Yeah, so on, like, let's say,
Yeah, I'm assuming at this job they probably have a board so like you could be in one spot. Is that what they're doing? One spot so they can control the upstairs and downstairs on one thermostat?
Well, you know what? Let me just kind of draw it out real quick. Yes, and
Separate trunk line. One thermostat runs to a different dampener. And
That's
one runs
kind
to
of-
another, so it opens up when it calls for heat in one area.
Yeah.
And sends a certain amount of the modulating furnace through to there.
Can it do both at the same time?
it can, yes.
Okay.
Cool.
So there's a.
Both
We'll just,
can
we'll
open
just
it
do
up.
this as a.
All it does is sends a signal to the dampener to open up.
Yeah.
So if the other one's open, it just sends a signal to the other one to open.
I just wasn't
Thankfully,
sure if
otherwise it would be a pain in the ass to try and heat
The
stuff.
thermostat have enough power?
No, the fan about to blow both of them at the same time.
And there'll be a lot of wires running around, but it's like pretty much the exact same thing. You'll have your, and remember this is both 5 wires, so it's the same thing with all the wires going into it. And so I'm gonna go over this one. So this would be your T-stats. This is gonna be your zone board.
I mean, pretty much wire up the same way on the zone board.
Yeah,
It's just
they-
separate spots on it.
it's gonna be almost identical. It'll have the same thing, you know, your wires from your thermostat exactly the same. It'll come into your zone board. It'll say zone 1, you know, R, W, Y, G, C for zone 1, R, W, Y, G, whatever. I can't see those letters for both. And then you'll have zone 1, zone 2, which is going to your zone dampeners. And so when your thermostat turns on, it'll send 24 volts to this, to your furnace to kick your furnace on or your AC on, and then that will start the process, and it'll either be blowing through both because both thermostats are calling, or just one, and that's what we're going to be doing over there. So.